The winter air rule that quietly kept old homes dry, warm, and breathable. Long before electricity, forced air furnaces, humidifiers, and smart thermostats, folks in cold climates followed a simple winter air rule that modern homes routinely violate. It was not written down in manuals or taught in schools. It was passed through practice, observation, and hard experience. The rule was this: winter air must always be exchanged slowly, deliberately, and continuously, even in the coldest weather. Not sealed out, not trapped, moved. This rule protected timber homes from rot, kept lungs clear, prevented mold long before the word existed, and reduced heating fuel use in ways that surprise modern builders. What we now call ventilation science was once everyday household discipline. Understanding how it worked explains why so many pre-electric homes lasted for centuries, while modern ones, well, they often fail in just a few decades. So, how did old homes manage air without fans, ducts, or power? Well, pre-electric homes weren't exactly airtight, but they weren't drafty by accident either. Builders actually designed them to breathe in controlled ways. Air entered low, exited high, and moved slowly enough that heat stayed inside while moisture escaped. This balance was even more important in winter than summer, since cold air holds less moisture, and indoor moisture was always there from things like cooking, washing, breathing, and heating fires. Back in the day, chimneys were really the primary drivers of air movement in a house. Anytime you had an active fire burning, it created a steady upward pull that would remove stale air from inside. Now, that pull had to be replaced, so fresh air would find its way in through planned gaps, like loose window sashes, floorboard seams, wall cavities, and even purpose-built vents down near the floor. The movement of air was gentle and continuous, There weren't any blasts, no pressure buildup, and definitely no stagnant pockets hanging around. This kind of steady airflow prevented condensation inside walls, which, honestly, is the root cause of mold, rot, and even respiratory irritation. These days, modern homes often flip this logic by sealing up every gap while still producing moisture, and that ends up trapping it inside insulation and living spaces. Heat without airflow was never the goal. Warmth with dryness was. In winter, the real enemy was dampness, not cold. Damp air steals heat faster from the body, degrades materials, and, honestly, inflames lungs. Old homes accepted a small amount of cold air infiltration because it removed moisture continuously. This is why historic homes often felt dry, warm even when the temperature was lower by modern standards. Dry air allows the body to regulate heat more efficiently. Clothing stayed drier. Bedding dried overnight. Walls did not sweat. Wood stoves burned cleaner because oxygen levels stayed stable. The winter air rule ensured that no room became stagnant. Bedrooms, in particular, were often given dedicated air paths so exhaled moisture did not accumulate overnight. This reduced coughing, chest infections, and what was once called winter lung. Windows were not sealed shut all winter. They were managed. Upper sashes were cracked slightly, often no more than a finger's width, even in freezing weather. Lower sashes remained tight. This allowed warm, moist air to escape at the top while, preventing cold drafts at body level. In some regions, especially Northern Europe and colonial North America, interior storm shutters or secondary window frames were used. These allowed ventilation without heat loss by creating a buffer zone. The outer window leaked intentionally, and the inner layer stayed warmer. Moisture exited before reaching the coldest surface. This practice alone, honestly, prevented thousands of homes from developing internal frost damage. When modern homes seal both layers completely, moisture condenses invisibly inside walls instead. Heating systems were designed to move air, not just warm it. Wood stoves, masonry heaters, and fireplaces were placed to encourage circulation. Central placement was common not for aesthetics but for airflow. As warm air rose from the heat source, cooler air was drawn across the floor, dried and reheated. Some homes used vent holes between floors or above door frames to guide this movement. Others relied on stairwells as vertical air chimneys. This constant circulation prevented cold corners and damp zones where mold thrives. The key point is that heat sources were integrated into the air system of the house. Modern heaters often isolate heat production from ventilation, breaking this balance. Respiratory health really improved in homes that followed winter air discipline. With constant low-level ventilation, the indoor smoke concentration from cooking and heating was reduced quite a bit. It also diluted pathogens and, it prevented that excessive dryness you get from overheating sealed rooms. Folks just slept better with slightly cooler, fresher air, plain and simple. Elderly occupants in particular benefited because stagnant air, it really worsens chronic bronchitis and those winter coughs. The old belief that night air was dangerous was often misunderstood. What folks actually feared was damp, trapped air, not moving cold air. Homes that followed the winter air rule produced fewer complaints of chest tightness, headaches, and, lethargy. These were recognized effects long before modern indoor air quality studies confirmed them. This knowledge is not obsolete. It can be applied today without tearing down walls. The principle remains the same: continuous, gentle air exchange that favors moisture removal over heat trapping. Cracking upper windows briefly during the day, especially after cooking or bathing, restores pressure balance and removes moisture. Using vented range hoods and bathroom fans strategically rather than constantly prevents negative pressure traps. Avoiding overhumidification in winter protects both walls and lungs. Wood stove users can apply this directly by ensuring a dedicated outside air source, preventing the stove from pulling air aggressively through random leaks. This stabilizes airflow and reduces drafts. Basements benefit greatly from this rule. Allowing slow winter airflow prevents condensation on cold masonry. Historic homes rarely sealed basements completely for this reason. Counterintuitively, homes that breathe properly used less fuel. Dry air heats faster, dry materials hold heat longer. Stoves burned more efficiently with a steady oxygen supply, Chimneys drafted cleanly instead of back-puffing smoke, which made a big difference. When moisture is trapped, heat energy is wasted evaporating water rather than actually warming the space. Old builders understood this through experience, no doubt about it. The winter air rule conserved fuel by keeping everything dry. This is why some 18th and 19th century homes actually consume less wood per square foot than modern sealed houses using advanced insulation. The past did not ignore comfort. It really prioritized durability and health above all. The winter air rule was more of a quiet discipline, not just some catchy slogan. Back then, homes were treated as living systems, not just containers to be sealed up tight. Honestly, ignoring this rule leads to things like mold remediation industries, respiratory epidemics, and structural decay. But following it, that leads to real longevity. The evidence stands in surviving buildings and written household manuals that emphasized ventilation, even in those severe winters, For survivalists, this knowledge is just, invaluable. In grid-down conditions, managing air becomes just as important as managing heat. For historians, it explains why certain architectural choices, persisted across centuries and climates. This winter air rule isn't just nostalgia. It's functional history with direct application today. If this kind of grounded, practical historical knowledge matters to you, support the work here by subscribing to Warfield Prepper Chronicles and sharing this guide with others who care about how people actually lived, built, and survived. Preserving real knowledge starts with passing it on,